The future is now, thank God. It's what you don't know. Whenever I go to large conventions and meetings, people ask me to tell them what the future looks like. Since I've done so much in the past, I refuse to. Because no one knows what the future looks like, least of all me. Some say the future is stopped. Nothing is happening anymore. Everything looks dire. This is what they do at large conferences. They say, everything is wrong, everything is terrible. Look, the only wise person, God himself, tells you to experience things for yourself. But they reach out their hands and tell you what to do. I don't understand it. I don't understand anything.
The first time I flew was when I was 20 years old. Until then, I'd only been to airports to say goodbye to people, and even that didn't happen very often. But it's true, when I started working at airports, I thought it was wonderful. I liked it so much because they were places with almost no history. To me, an airport is a mythical, alternative place. This quadratic building, a long building, the city on the one side, the planes on the other, such things. The pure myth of flying, represented by the city. That's never existed before. I believe there was a time when people in many countries began to regard airports as important entry ports. Therefore, these buildings were given a new importance, namely, of being able to say something important about a country. People had technical ambitions, which were previously only related to railway stations. It was similar to the point in time when people in Europe were talking about the era of cathedrals, about having to be sensible and that the accountants should devise the projects rather than the architects. There was a moment of great optimism, great symbolism in the blueprints. Yes, I believe people will say that 1 or 2 specific decades will at some point be called the era of airports, just like people talk about the era of cathedrals.
Le temps des aérogares, comme on a dit, le temps des cathédrales. Ou la dernière vue qu'on aura de ce pays. Donc on est responsable
An airport, the very first and the very last thing one sees of a country. Therefore, we're somewhat responsible for what the country wants to be and wants to show of itself. You communicate all that with a view gazing towards the future and not the past. Everyone regards air traffic as something pointing forward, showing that progress is being made. That way, you have great freedom. But nevertheless, if you want the building to be rooted, and this is where I agree with Renzo Piano, it's necessary for people to feel it is their building, and not something which simply fell from the sky to suddenly exist on Earth. No architect has designed more airports than Paul Andréu. Since the 1970s, he has designed more than 50 airports worldwide for the French airport company ADP, Aéroport de Paris, from Paris to Cairo, from Abu Dhabi to Jakarta. However, a patent solution for a great airport is still alien to the 69-year-old.
That was a funny story. As we were to participate in the competition and everything had to happen very quickly, we'd only drawn rough sketches of the beams. And when we were about to start with the proper drawings, I saw, when flicking through a magazine, a finished sketch, and asked myself all of a sudden, was that our project or that of someone else? What exactly is this? This very banal moment made me realize that I could no longer distinguish between my work and that of someone else. I needed to change that. An airport deserves more. You knew you couldn't build something too complicated. Therefore, I designed these 4 waves for the roof. I don't know why. I had the inspiration that everything would be blue. I even found a Chinese translation of the poem L'Azur, the Blue, by Mallarmé, in order to hand it in with our entry. This probably had no effect on the decision whatsoever. However, I wanted everything to be blue. I've rarely shown much enthusiasm for a specific color, but this time, that's how it was. Together with the engineers, we searched for completely different solutions. We then designed this very individual structure with lines diagonally interconnected by cables to make them stable. The cables are tightly tautened since the curving underneath is very round. If you relocate these pointed structures sideways, they would move back into position afterwards. It thus has its own stability of form. It doesn't need complex elements on all sides, as there is a kind of clarity. White rods, cables that you can barely see, and to amplify the effect, the white rods are let through at a point where the beams are crossing over, and at their highest point are light fixtures. That way, you sometimes get the impression that the bars are floating in the sky. When the sun shines on them, you get the feeling they are levitating and disappearing into the sky. It was complicated. To tighten the ropes, we used globes that were specifically devised to fit into the tubes. From the very beginning, I wanted this airport to be surrounded by gardens. That was the reason for us almost not being awarded the project. There were a number of incompetent engineers who were asking, "What? This ground is worth so much, and it is of such commercial interest. You want to have plants here, and even worse, plant bamboo, which needs a specific kind of soil?" They claimed that this was scandalous and suggested the project should be given to someone else. At the end of the day, however, the politicians were to decide. I told them that if they really wanted the airport of Pudong to change something in the city, for it to become a more agreeable city with new comforts, how could you not do the same with the airport? Otherwise, first impressions will be negative. However, you could also say our real value lies with the urban development and the gardens with space. We were willing to sacrifice something for that. The politicians were of my opinion. The others didn't want it. The airport itself can barely keep up with the explosive commercial developments of the mega city Shanghai. All in all, the target is 4 terminals built on an area of 840,000 square meters with a capacity of 80 million passengers. That is approximately 4 times the amount of people being checked through at the moment. The start of the 3rd terminal happened during the basic construction of Terminal 2. A new runway is almost completed. By 2015,
a capacity of 60 million passengers per year is expected. A world of mass mobility and total information, one in which space and time are compressed and familiar places are replaced by neutral zones. The modern airport, nothing but a faceless passage, isolated and lacking history. The French ethnologist Marc Auger wants to establish clarity and suggests separating buildings into places and non-places.
Si un lieu est un endroit où les gens ont des relations
If a location is a place where humans have a relationship with the space and the people within it, then it is indeed true that airports are, to a certain degree at least, non-places. The periphery of modernity. Apart from the deeply symbolic monumental architecture and the countless cargo planes distributing made-in-China merchandise all over the globe, announcing the new assertiveness of the most populated nation in the world, the rhythm is not determined by departure and arrival times. But nevertheless, even the airport and its technology is looking for reconciliation with nature. Its area, 30 kilometers from the city center, is situated within an earthquake zone, and due to its proximity of the East China Sea, is constantly threatened by typhoons.
Je vais vous donner une image de physique.
I'll give you an image taken from physics. You have two ways of describing a river. You can either go to a place from which you can see the river passing by. You then look at how the water runs past you, at which speed, and then you continue observing what is happening at the specific point. Or you can choose a specific drop of water and follow its movement. Both scenarios describe exactly the same river. There are two possibilities of looking closely at a physical phenomenon and of defining it.
Si vous faites un bâtiment, vous pouvez dire.
When you plan a building, you could say, I'm starting from every possible position to figure out what happens. Or you can spend the entire time thinking of the movements of a single passenger, one who has feelings and makes decisions. However, one who is also moving through the entire airport. If you look at the sum of these movements, you can see what happens on the static level. For example, what happens with a group of people who are waiting at the same time. By contrast, you can also see everything like a continuous mass moving steadily. It's true that I think of this movement when I sketch. I think less about the function within the static room. At this moment in time, I often have the goal of designing boundaries for this movement rather than the spaces in which the movement takes place.
Plutôt que des espaces dans lesquels je vais organiser des flots.
It's the question of the chicken and the egg. Which came first, chicken or egg? Is it the movement which creates the space? Or is it the space in which the movement occurs? Of course, it's both at the same time, but depending on your own opinion, decision, rational ability, you always think of one rather than of the other. I have a slight tendency to think in this direction. modern flights of fancy. Collectivity without movement. Solitude without oscillation. A neutral non-place without any kind of interpersonal relations. Cathedrals of transfer. The conquest of ease. Transparency and immateriality. The monumental frame for anticipation and parting. Aspiration and wistfulness. Uncertainty and transcendence. More than its instrumental worth, the works of an architect are the development of an individual and a quest for oneself.
Et à la fin, il y a des choses qui ne sont pas parfaites.
In the end, what's left in the end? Some things just aren't perfect. There will always be imperfect things.